Hey Chris, thanks for sending me over this video by Morg, which is God actually the devil? I promise you some specific feedback on why I think the logic in this is really basic and is actually inaccurate in a lot of cases and misconstrues the truth. So I figured the best way to do that would be through video. So we're going to play the video that Morg created, and I'm going to comment in it and pause it at times, and we'll see where we land.
And the devil said, "Every firstborn son in Egypt will die." Actually, that wasn't the devil. That was God. Surprise! He just killed all the firstborn children and innocent babies that have done nothing wrong, even killing the firstborn of the cattle. That is fucking insane. Does this sound like a God of love to you? We're going to use logic and reason to show that God is not actually God at all, but the devil himself. Some people
So I'm really looking forward to this and hearing when this actually happens. So if this is like the sixth time I've listened to the video, I'm hoping it'll be in it this time because it wasn't in the preceding five times. Uh, the basis of this guy's argument is, hey, I'm going to look at what I see God doing, and based on that, I'm going to judge if God is good or not. And if God is not good, then he must be the devil. The logic's really just unsound and kind of reeks of ignorance to Christianity in general, especially Christian teaching. There's really nothing new here. It's basic. These arguments are extremely common. I wasn't overall impressed with the content of this, but with that being said, there's some stuff that's worth talking about. Like he just talked about, hey, God killed all the babies in Egypt. He's talking about during the Exodus when Israel was slave to Egypt. Uh, and he's talking specifically about the plague of death, which is the last plague of the 10 plagues that he gave, where God killed the firstborn son of everybody in Egypt, or more specifically, everybody who didn't have the blood of a lamb on their doorpost when the destroyer angel came to kill them all. So, why does doing that make God evil? And on what basis can Morg judge if something is good or evil? If there's no universal lawgiver or if there's no universal law, then really he's just talking about what he likes and doesn't like or what his preference is and is basing off of that. It's very fluid, it's not finite, and it's really weak. I mean, how is a person going to look at the creator and say, "Ooh, you did something wrong"? Like imagine an ant walking into the architecture of Notre Dame and saying, "Ugh, who did this? It's a little drafty." It's like you're an ant. You can't speak to the complexities and see all the reasons why I built things the way I did and why certain things were innate. You don't have the full picture, and it's very similar here. It's almost laughable that people can sit back and say, "Oh, I'm going to look at what God does, and based on that, I'm going to be able to judge God." It's weak. So let's go on. Oh, and before we go on, actually, one other thing he said. He's like, God killed all the innocent babies and people and cattle, and that's insane. Well, there's no such thing as an innocent person. Every person, from the moment of their existence, it is guilty of sin. They are tainted by sin from just not even morally, but just their innate being. Because when Adam had sin enter into the world, it passed on to all of his descendants, which is us. So there's no such thing as an innocent person. So that means that at any time, God has the right to revoke the life of a person, and he would be in right in doing so because the person is evil. The person has a bent towards evil. So Christians don't really have a problem with that argument in general, which he's going to put out several more about, like the Amalekites and Abraham and Isaac and um, it, the even in Romans 1 it talks about Romans 1 through 3 it talks about how everybody is evil. Nobody loves God. There's no such thing as a good person. What turns a person from evil to good is God changing their heart. In Egypt at the time, there's no such thing as innocent people. God had every right to kill those people.
despise Donald Trump, while others think he is tremendous. When Hitler was in power, many people loved him. So how can you tell what kind of person or deity you're dealing with. If God is supposed to be supremely good and the devil supremely bad, let's take a look at God's actions and see how they measure up.
Okay, well, first, how do you judge good and bad? How can you look at God's actions and say, "Ooh, was that a good action or was that a bad action?" It, I don't. What standard are you judging that by, Morg? I don't. I can't track with you there.
And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. Let's see what else. Then God said, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. And this story is told in churches as an example for religious people to follow and model themselves after. I'm sorry, but if a voice told me to kill my child, I think maybe I'd have some questions. Let's see.
Yep, that's exactly right. Every Sunday, people flow into churches. The pastor gets up, tells the story, and then tells the church that I want you to kill your firstborn son. That's the core of the Christian faith. No, that's not what the story is about. What about the end of the story, where God stops Abraham from killing his son? See, the point of this story has nothing to do with child sacrifice or human sacrifice. In fact, God hates human sacrifice, and it explicitly says that in Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and that's one of the reasons why he hates some of the native, what's the word? The promised land, the native people in Canaan, the Canaanites, is because they were having human sacrifices. God hates that. So there's no teaching in saying that God condones human sacrifice. So what's the point of that story? The point of the story was Abraham didn't have any posterity. He didn't have any family. He God spoke to him. He left his land and started following God. He met his wife Sarah and they grew old and they didn't have any child. And God promised Abraham, saying, hey, I'm going to give you a son, and through this son, I am going to bless the nations of the earth and make my name great. So Abraham waits 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20. He's old now. He doesn't have any sons. He's broaching 100. And he's like, where's my son? So he finally has a son. They name him Isaac. And he starts growing up. And later, God comes to Abraham and says, hey, I want you to go to the mountain of Moriah and sacrifice your son to me. So what does Abraham do? He goes forward and does what God says. So in that text, it talks about how Abraham reasoned that, hey, even if I do kill my son, I know God can bring him back to life. So I would say, yeah, if the Abraham also had questions about a voice, or in this case, a physical person who was God in front of him, telling him to kill his son, he did that. He decided to go forward and trust God. So the story is about obedience, not human sacrifice. So the one thing that Abraham had loved most was his son. He waited for the son. He wanted it. And was he willing to give that up to be obedient to God? And does he love God more than everything else that he has in this world? And Abraham was. He was willing to do that. God didn't want it. It was a test. It was a test. And so, no, human sacrifice being taught, that's just not accurate at all.
Another one of God's commands. Now go, attack the Amalekites, and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. We could go on and on. It's filled with violence, sexism, and homophobia. Here we have a being that is an absolute tyrant, that treats his people like slaves, demands animal sacrifice, human sacrifice, and has no problem murdering innocent children. This does not fit the definition of a loving being, but perfectly describes an evil satanic being.
Okay, so where does God treat people like slaves? Is it the part where he descends from heaven down to earth and puts on human flesh, lives on the earth, allows the humans to kill him and spit on him and mock him and beat him and kill him ultimately? Is that is that a slave? Is that a tyrant? No, he did that so that he could save the people that he loved. This presentation of God being a tyrant or using people as slaves or demanding human sacrifice is just inaccurate. Animal sacrifices, yeah, he says, kill the animals as sacrifices to me. But on what basis are you going to say that's wrong? And even if he did say human sacrifices, or even if he did, and which he didn't, even if he did, on what basis are you standing on to say that's wrong? Is it really just logic? Because I would say philosophically that you're found wanting in that regard. But again, about homophobia and sexism and things like that, if we embrace the situation that this being actually is God and actually did create the entire universe, then he has the right to do whatever he wants to do, including being able to define what his design for his creation was. So if he defines marriage as being between a man and a woman like he does in Matthew 19, um, what's who can sit there and say that he's wrong for doing that? Or Romans 1, where he defines homosexuality as being a perversion of the natural order he set in place. That's not homophobia. He is God, and he defines what is natural and what isn't. Um, so we move on.
The greatest trick the devil ever played was convincing the world that he was God. The Christians looked at this being and declared him to be God. What kind of messed up psychological framework do you have to have in order to worship and love such a monster?
Again, like the monster that came down from heaven, or the monster that saved all of Israel from slavery and freedom, from slavery in Egypt. By sending the 10 plagues to Egypt, parting the waters, leading them through the desert. Like, I don't understand where this concept of a monster is coming from. If you don't know the Christian teaching, then I could understand why taking select verses and stories like this out of context could be portrayed this way, but there's no intellectual integrity here. This is basic 101 stuff that anybody who really had a question could find the answer to this.
Remember that Christians teach their children all of these stories and tell them that there is nothing wrong with them. Christian parents have no problem whatsoever telling their children that they will burn in hell for eternity if they don't worship this monstrous God.
Christianity is not fueled on fear of hell. It's fueled on love of God. God loved us, and he demonstrated his love for us. And so the thing that fuels a Christian is not, "Ooh, I'm going to go to hell if I don't do this." It's not fire insurance. It is a recognition that God created the universe. He created us. He's called us to himself, and he's come to give us life and life abundantly. Um, and as you do that, and as you accept that, you realize how accurate the description of the Bible is for the human condition. I've never seen anything more accurate, but humans are generally evil, unhappy, and the solution for that is a relationship with your Creator. Our fuel isn't fear. Our fuel is faith in God and God Himself. So, but again, he's vilifying, saying that, hey, there is a hell and you'll burn in hell if you don't worship God. Again, that's not the way that it's portrayed in Christianity, although some people probably do that, and that may be what Morg has experienced in his life. But that is not that's not the message, and that's not how Christianity operates. But all that being said, it is true there is a hell. It is true that you would burn in hell for eternity should you not bend the knee to Jesus Christ. That is absolutely a fact. Is that the force majeure, the major thing we're pushing forward and living off of? No, that's just a byproduct of rejecting God.
They tell them that this God can read all of their thoughts and will know if they are thinking of anything sinful. This is mental child abuse.
I can't get away from that. Morgue has this picture of like God with a lightning bolt sitting up in the sky, ready to strike. Ooh, you thought something sinful. Pff. Oh, you did something evil. Pff. And it's like he's out to squash us. But the Bible describes God and his love for his people, right? He chose Israel. He has a chosen people today, who are not only a part of the nation of Israel, but of all the rest of the world as well, that he has demonstrated his love for to the point of being descending from his throne to on earth and being willing to die for those people and providing a way for them to be saved. So this isn't a lightning bolt God waiting to strike people for doing things wrong or waiting to find a reason to send people to hell. This is a God who deeply loves his creation and the people that he's called for himself. So, but does God know your thoughts? Absolutely. He knows your thoughts and he knows your heart. He knows how evil it is. And that's why he came down and died to save you from it. He's not oblivious to this, he's intervened for it. So this isn't child abuse, that's part of the message. The human condition is that we're broken, we're evil, and we need a savior. So it's not child abuse.
Children don't take this as a story. They believe it to be 100% real.
It is 100% real. The fact that the Bible exists today is testimony to from people who were there and said, "I saw Jesus die. I saw him come back to life. I saw him after he resurrected from the dead. I've seen him do miraculous things in our life." And so, if you want to dismiss all of the evidence of the eyewitness testimony, like John was there, he saw Jesus on the cross, and he wrote a few books of the Bible. Um, I don't understand why that would be omitted as evidence, but there's great testimony in the existence of Scripture for not only the existence of God, but the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, bodily.
Trust me, I was raised as a Christian, and I was taught all of these things as being completely true. I can't tell you how many nights I laid awake at night, terrified, scared to death that I was going to hell. Mainstream religion is child abuse. We don't tolerate physical child abuse, so why do we allow parents to mentally traumatize innocent children? Anyone that has gone through mental abuse will know that it's just as bad and can sometimes be worse than physical abuse. We're not.
So I can't help but hear Richard Dawkins in this expression. And Morg, I'm sorry if that's been your experience, but the God that we serve is not an abusive God. There are always people who try to corrupt his power and his order, and they do abuse their roles and positions and even their children. So evil things happen. But that is not the God of the Bible. It's not. This is somebody who I would willingly submit myself to uh, it, to serve because of how great he is and by great I mean how powerful he is, how much he's demonstrated his love for us, and how he's shown himself to be faithful time and time and time again, not only in the testimony of the Bible or in the testimony of people who've lived out their faith in him, and not only in my own life, but it's evident everywhere that there is a God in the world. You can't say that everything we see around us came from nothing. Lawrence Krauss does that. There are lots of people who will say, "What do you mean by nothing? Maybe there was something," but ultimately there has to be a first cause. And so there's no way around that there is a creator of this world, that there is a God. And I think Jesus's resurrection from the dead uh, clearly points to which God that is, and that's why God demonstrated his power in Egypt when he freed the slaves, that all the gods the Egyptians were worshiping were false, like Ra, the god of the sun. Well, God said, "Well, no, you don't actually. Ra's not a real God. And I'm going to prove that. You can pray to him all you want, but I'm going to make it darkness, which is one of the plagues." So I don't. I can sense that your passion here is is that this is abuse. And I'm sorry if you were abused. but that doesn't make the existence of God inaccurate. It doesn't make God evil. It just means you've experienced pain like everybody else in this world.
Not talking about modern Satanists in this video. There are many today who call themselves Satanists that have actually fought hard against mainstream religion, and for that we commend them. Also remember that we don't actually think the God and the devil described in the Bible actually exist. That's crazy. It doesn't matter that this God doesn't actually exist. The concept of this God is wreaking havoc across the world. The idea of this God is enslaving minds. Let's create a world in which children are shown that they are beautiful, free beings with infinite potential. What?
Again, your description of the human condition, it's beautiful, free beings with infinite potential, is just inaccurate. You can look at any person and see how broken they are. There are glimpses of beauty and scintillations of power and potential, but most of the potential you see in people is for the bad, not the good. Yeah, there was something else I wanted to say here. Where jump back for a second. Yeah, we're free beings. Oh, that it doesn't matter that there's no God. So this whole argument is basically saying, hey, God is the devil, but I don't actually believe in God or the devil. I'm just going to use the Christian's own teaching to prove that the devil is God. But in order to do that, my representation of the Christian position and the Christian's position of good and evil and God and the devil isn't even accurate. This is what I meant by it's being logically weak, inaccurate, misconstrued. There's no interaction with actual Christian teaching here. This is more you're just on a rant.
Enslaving minds. Let's create a world in which children are shown that they are beautiful, free beings with infinite potential. One where children are not taught that they are sinful, worthless slaves to a vile God.
Never has in anywhere in the Bible is a person described as worthless. In fact, every person is made in the image of God, and that's why God created rules or laws that if you kill another person, you would be killed. Every person has value.
In the sky, it's time to take a stand and to make our voices heard. Join us and create with us a free world. Ad Astra, to the stars.